Hello everyone. So I was going to talk about this eventually, but obviously my first video after Christmas, I just want to wish everybody a happy Christmas and I hope you had a good Christmas. But first of all, I want to talk about what Archbishop David Martin, the Archbishop of Ireland, has said to the Vatican, basically, has said, and particularly being a Catholic myself, and I was going to talk about this eventually, but it suppose it's a very fitting time to talk about it, and that's the lack of people getting married across the country. Now, the Archbishop suggests that we get a minister, that there be a minister appointed to the Irish government, the cabinet, minister for marriage or something like that. That's what he's trying to say. But first of all, I say to the Archbishop respectfully, he's living in delusions if he thinks that's going to help anything at all. Because let's be fair, it'll be another big paycheck for some politician on 170,000 maybe a year and expenses, allowances. He do nothing basically. He'd be good for nothing. The same as all of them in the government. They're good for nothing. And this is the thing I would say to the Archbishop too. There's a lot of children, there's a lot of young people like myself. Take for example, they can't get a house, they can't get anything. How can they expect to get married, have children? And this is the thing, they can't get married, they can't have children because it's too expensive. And we'll get into some of the statistics here now in a second. But particularly the biggest issue at the moment for a lot of young people like myself is, you can't get a house. And how are you supposed to raise children, take for example, because that's obviously the Catholic way. You get married and then have children, etc. But for a lot of people too, it's the fact of the matter they can't get a house. Years ago, people could get a house, and he says in some parishes they're down by 50, in some cases 70% in some parts of the country. And he's right in saying that in Cavan it's pretty bad, it's not great, to be totally honest. It's probably down by 40% since 1980, which is a huge percentage. But this is the thing. There's no support from the state, and the church is nowhere to be found. Years ago, the church used to help out people. Nowadays, I don't see the Diocese of Kilmore and Cavan doing anything. There's no support for families from the church. The church is nowhere to be found to help anybody. Years ago, they used to be out to try and help people. Nowadays, the church is nowhere to be found. There's people in Cavan Town struggling, and the church is nowhere to be found. I don't know where they are. Where are the priests and so? They're not out helping anybody anyway. But long story short, it's too expensive. Like we talked about it a few months ago, that basically the price to have an only, whether bog standard wedding with just an only venue and a few inviting people, etc., was around 70,000-80,000, which is a lot of money. Like, you think about that, 70,000-80,000 is a lot of money, particularly for only people, young people, take for example, coming out of college, you maybe meet their sweetheart, etc., and they try and get married and stuff. How could you afford that? You would be taking out loans and stuff and then trying to get a house. Years ago, that was doable. Like, it was doable. I even just remember a few people talking to me, older people talking to me about their wedding, that years ago they paid, I think they said it was £600, which was a lot of money back then. Probably would be, I don't know, would be 15,000, maybe 20,000 today, but something like that. It would be a lot of money, probably £600 or nearly £700 back in 1980s up. And that's one person at the top of my head I'm thinking about, which they said it was expensive back then, but this, as they said, because the granddaughter was getting married, they said it was nothing like what they, because it's too expensive nowadays to get married. But yeah, nobody's getting married nowadays. But appointing a minister would do nothing, basically, and I say that to the Archbishop. You might as well throw the money at the wall, because it's a society problem. It really is a society. And we have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to this, and I should have mentioned about it before. But particularly a lot of people nowadays, we see hundreds across Europe too, that a lot of people, when they do get married, a lot of young people particularly, and on average people in their 30s, in the late 30s get married nowadays. It's not like in the early 20s or in the late 20s, which was the kind of the custom years ago. Nowadays it's more like into your 40s now you get married. But this is the thing, a lot of people who get married divorce, and the simple as that. My parents did divorce when I was younger too, but obviously they're still with me, etc., of course, and we're a happy family, but we're separate. My mother and my father separated, and that happened when I was younger too. And that was just after the marriage referendum, etc. And I do agree with the marriage referendum, because people shouldn't stay with people the rest of their life if they're not happy, because people years ago lived unhappy lives because they were with an abusive husband, or in some cases abusive wife. And people live the rest of their lives like that years ago, and I do think because people can lose touch too with their partner, with their partner, they can fade away their distance, if that makes any sense. The connection breaks in the nicest possible way to put it. So I do agree with people, when they're not happy, they shouldn't stay in a marriage and stuff, of course. But this is the thing. There's a huge amount of that in this country. Like, even just the few marriages that are happening, a lot of them break down and end up with divorce due to many reasons, due to cheating. In a lot of cases too, it's to do with money. It's supposed that to do with mortgages. It's a lot. I've heard many stories across the years was to do with mortgages. In terms of money, trying to make ends meet. It was difficult. And that's how marriages broke down. But a lot of cases cheating, and it's affairs, etc. in a lot of cases too. So it's a huge society problem too, that. And he says it's very worrying for society, and it's full stop very worrying. And it is worrying for society. But this is the thing, the church, he would say the church is going to try and do their bit to try and help out young people trying to get married, etc. To do their bit. The church is going to meet them and pay a bit of the marriage or something. There's not a word of that for the church. Because we see in the Vatican, and I'm speaking as a Catholic myself, and my blood boils when I see this, all the gold and all that in the Vatican and stuff, and people starving in the Vatican, all the money going to the Vatican. Now, not so much the rural parishes in Cavan and other parts, but my blood boils, and particularly now we see in County Cavan and stuff with the Bishop of Kilmore at the moment. He won't say anything about kids being basically transgenderism and stuff like that, and I have huge issues with that. But and especially in Martin too, he's very silent on these things too, about children basically being indoctrinated in a lot of cases that the church is nowhere to be found. And I'm speaking as a Catholic myself. I'm deeply ashamed by the diocese of Kilmore not being able to speak up. My diocese here, my parish here, deeply ashamed about the bishop here. But this is the thing, we have to try and do something to help people. Particularly young people, as I say, people are getting married into the 40s, sometimes in the late 50s now. People who are getting married. But the cost is just simply too much for a lot of people. It's simply just for an only wedding is too much. And I know people say they go to a registration office too, but still at the same time, it's a lot of cost. It's not like you just turn up and you get it. It's simple as that. You have a wedding ring and stuff and the dress and suit. It's a lot of money. Nowadays, years ago was different. Nowadays, it's too expensive. And the biggest issue too, when they do get married, they want to have kids, etc. And they can't have it. So what's the point in getting married? Years ago, the whole idea was you get married, you have kids, you have a family, start a family. Nowadays, that's impossible for nearly 90% of the Irish public. That's impossible, literally impossible, because they can't get a house, they can't get a place to live. Because there's no point living in emergency accommodation or on the streets when you want to have 2 or 3 children or a child. The church is nowhere to be found in offering them that. Let's put that way too. So it'd be different if the church was saying, look, if you get married and stuff, we'll try and help you out. We'll try and at least if they said that. But the church is saying you're basically on your own. It's a hope and a prayer. He says about appointing a minister. Like, what good is that going to do? There'll be more money given to some fellow that's in the government that doesn't give a damn about the Irish public. And let's be fair, he probably won't even. Half of the Irish government don't believe in God. They don't believe in the backwards looking at your sovereignty too. But they don't believe in God. They think they are God. That's a subset. So the archbishop too is appealing to the devil in my case. What I'm trying to say, because the people that are in the government and stuff, they're atheists. They don't care about God. They couldn't care less about Catholicism. They don't believe. They think they are God. They think they are God and Savior. But again, he's appealing to the devil, I would say. Because they're not going to do it. The only thing they care about is money. That's their God. And of course they think they're God themselves, but money's their God. So it's basically, it would do no good for anybody, basically, to appoint any minister. But yeah, this is just my opinion. But again, as I say, I think it's senseless. It would be senseless. It would be another big job for somebody that'll do nothing for anybody. It's good for nothing. Like, I can... All of them in the government are good for nothing. But even the heads of the church here in Ireland are good for nothing in a lot of cases too. I'm not saying the only priests. I met some great priests in my life and great nuns too. They're great people. But again, there's some bad eggs in the Vatican particularly that are not great people. But yeah, it is a worrying thing for the state. It's a worrying thing for society. But we have to look at how we help these people instead of just talking nonsense about appointing a minister and stuff like that. We have to try and get help for these people, young people particularly, if they want to get married. To give them some kind of houses, some kind of support. If they do get married, you give them how would you put it, a loan or a grant or something like that to help them if they do get married. To have the church fork out a bit of money, 50,000, 60,000, to help out a young couple that wants to get married, wants to have children. But the church is not offering them anything pretty much. They're saying get married. We're worried about people not getting married, but we're going to do nothing about it. It doesn't make any sense, but sure. Long behold. But anyway, let me know what you think. Subscribe and bye.